Good morning, everybody. I would like to start this story with some factual information about North American national parks and the surrounding areas. People seem to be disappearing at an alarming rate, never to be seen again at these places. And apparently, this has been happening for quite some time now. Just in the most recent few years, it's being documented now more closely. So we're starting to, see a pattern here with all these people coming together. A lot of these people, their disappearances cannot be explained. Whether that's been ruled out as animal attacks, people that are abducting children, just your typical crazy person that's killing people. Those have been ruled out in some of these cases. I believe up to 40 or 50% of these cases, investigators have ruled those kind of murders and disappearances out. I should say disappearances because these people's bodies have not been found, and they're all disappearing from these national parks. So the theories range from some type of predatory, unseen presence to possible UFO and alien abductions. It's pretty crazy, but I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. Nobody really knows what's snatching these people up, but if you do some research, you can actually find that this is on the web about these disappearances. So just keep that in your thoughts when you're listening to this story, and I hope you like it. So without further ado, let's get on to the story. The path. My sister disappeared when I was 15. Morgan and I were playing at the foot of our trail that leads from my backyard to the deep woods. It's actually more of a path because it's small and narrow. I had left her shortly to walk in the house to get a glass of lemonade. It was a hot summer evening, and I was teaching her how to play baseball and was finally getting into depth on catching. She was 11. I never thought that she would be kidnapped from our own backyard when we lived 5 miles from the nearest home. There had been no reports of suspicious vehicles near our back roads, nothing that anybody had seen, that is. Any vehicle that is not familiar from around here pretty much sticks out like a sore thumb. People are nosy around here, and there's a lot of front porch setting going on, if you know what I mean. But nobody had seen a vehicle or person that stuck out. The police still suspect a kidnapping, but I'm starting to doubt that more and more as the years go by. The problem with the kidnapping is that my sister has been seen since her disappearance. I haven't seen her, but other people in town have, or at least they claim to have seen her. The authorities, they're skeptical because of the nature of the alleged sightings. Now, my nearest neighbor, who lives miles away, as I mentioned earlier, nobody lives around me, claimed to have seen her standing at the edge of the tree line to his property on a Sunday morning about 6 months ago. He said he recognized her and went to call the police, but when he had returned to his back porch, she had vanished. Of course, this account was pretty chilling to the whole town, especially my family. There had been an immediate search of the woods, of course, and my parents' hopes had gotten up, only to be let down when all search attempts had failed. There have been other sightings, but nothing has panned out to anything that would suggest that my sister is still alive. I'm 17 now, and it's been 2 years. My parents still have not accepted it, and neither have I. The town itself has not quite been the same. I mean, little crime has ever happened here. Mostly just petty crime here and there. Everybody locks their doors now and watches their kids a lot closer. But I don't think any of the precautions are going to help. I'm not entirely sure that a person kidnapped my sister. I've only told this theory I have to one person, that being my best friend, and he listened to me. He says it sounds legit, even as crazy as it is. See, I think my sister is still alive, but just not of this earth, or at least on this field of life. I think something awful has pulled her into another dimension and is holding her there. I'm not sure if this entity is evil or if it's just like an alien origin. The reason I think this is because I have went out on our path many times since her disappearance and heard her voice. I've heard her pleading and begging, calling my name, screaming, but there's no sign of her. I've traveled the path for miles that goes down deep into the woods. The more I walk it, the more I can hear her voice. Even my parents have heard her. The first time my mother heard her voice on the trail, she spent the night out there with a flashlight hoping to find her. My father couldn't even convince her to come home that night. You'll never know how cruel it is to be able to hear your missing loved one's voice, but not be able to detect her. The police have no answers, and canine units have had no luck picking up a scent. I've even had her answer me when I call out. Mostly she can hear me at night. She always sounds like she is in distress and her voice is mostly faint, but I know it's her. Here lately, I've been sneaking out of my house late into the morning hours to see if I can somehow snatch her up from this invisible force. There's nothing more that I would like than to bring my sister home and wake up my parents to shock them and me be a hero. But I've failed so far. But that's my sister, my best friend, and I have already vowed to bring her back or die trying. So that's where I'm at tonight, sitting on my back porch, waiting. Shortly, I'll set off with my backpack into the forest in search of my missing sister. 11 p.m. that night. The night held a half moon in its glimmering blue-black sky. It was July and chilly here in North Carolina. As I quietly walked out the back door of our home, my mom caught me and grabbed my arm. "Michael, you have to stop this. I've lost one of my children. I can't afford to lose another." I looked at her as tears welled up in her eyes. She finally let go of my hand. "You haven't lost anybody. She's out there somewhere, Mom. You know it and I know it. I have to find her," I shot back. She looked at me with pleading eyes, but she knew I was too old and I was going to do what I was going to do. After all, I would be 18 in 2 weeks. I left her there at the door as I headed around back. I tried to push the sorrow I knew she had out of my mind because I had to focus. If nobody else was going to do their job, I would do it for them. So with flashlight in hand, I was on the trail by 20 after 11. Crickets and insects were loud at night. I could barely hear my footsteps on the path. An owl sounded off in the distance, and I could hear myself walk, though barely. And I couldn't believe how cold it was tonight. Maybe not necessarily cold, but still chilly for this time of year, even for here. About 30 minutes had passed. I was getting thirsty, so I finally stopped. I put my backpack down, got a drink of water from the bottle I'd packed. If you've ever been on a back road that has dense woods on each side of it at night, you know what this is like. It's pitch dark. You cannot see an inch in front of you. I turned on my flashlight just to see how dark it was and then turned it off again. I could not see anything but blackness. I would not be able to navigate without it. Not even a foot in any direction without being a guessing game. Suddenly the wind picked up out of nowhere. Now this chilled me even more. There was no storm on the horizon, so this was weird. Wind slapped me in the face, nearly pushing me sideways. It was a strong wind on a silent night, aside from the insects. That's when I saw a light in the forest. It was about 50 yards into the dense trees. As the wind howled, I wondered if somebody might be camping out here on private property. But this light was a fabulous variation of vivid colors, too bright to be a campfire. I stared at it for a few minutes, observing how bright it would get only to watch it dim to near nothing. This was obviously very unusual, and I had never seen anything like this. I knew she could be somewhere in that light. This had to be some source of where she was appearing and also vanishing back into. Or else someone was just really camping out there and throwing out some wicked flames. So I slowly entered the trees, careful of where I was walking. The wind steadily blew. As I approached this light, UFOs started to enter my mind more, and I expected to see a craft out there. But when I got within 25 feet, I could clearly tell it was not a UFO. It was like a window of light, but it kept changing from flat to rectangular, and it made a humming noise. It was the most spectacular sight I had ever seen, and I cannot explain it. It mesmerized me as I approached within 10 feet. Just for a moment, I actually forgot why I was even out here. That's how amazing this light was. I dropped my backpack, now in a full trance. It was like a nightmare in which I could not awake. Fear left my body from which I cannot explain, and I walked right through this lighted vortex of colors. Something popped, and I felt like I blacked out. Then I woke to an alien environment. Not because I could see it, but because I could feel it in my bones. Everything here was different. On the other side, it was darker than where I had just come from, if that's even possible. I felt as though the pressure on my body was greater, and my skin felt pressed against me more, if that makes sense. It's hard to explain, but it wasn't comfortable. I realized I was definitely no longer in a forest. I didn't know where I was, but I did remember walking to this thing and my purpose now. "Morgan," I called out. My voice echoed as if I was in some type of cave. I heard some metallic noises in the distance. My call must have awakened something or somebody. I felt very vulnerable and helpless. This is not Earth, I thought, staying as quiet as possible. I now heard what sounded like raindrops, but there was no rain. It also felt damp and muggy in here. "Morgan?" I called again, getting braver. This time I had definitely woke something. A loud scream came within that blackness, and I shuddered at the sound. "Michael," my sister's voice came back, but it was somehow different. She sounded younger. "Go back, they'll kill you." I did not answer, though I desperately wanted to. I knew I was in way over my head. I had no clue where I was or what I was up against, and my sister was warning me to stay back. But just the sound of her voice filled my heart with joy and happiness. Though I didn't feel like myself in this somewhat warped time portal, I still wanted to cry because I knew she was still alive. Then that horrific sound came again, louder as it shrieked. The best way I have to describe this, if there was such thing as a werewolf maybe, it would be a werewolf wounded and dying, crying out in pain and agony and death. Let's just say it was disturbing, and it was chilling. No human could have possibly had those type of vocals, and I don't even think any living animal could. Sounds of heavy thumping came all around me now. It sounded like large footsteps. "Michael," Morgan's voice cried, "go back. They're coming." "I won't go back without you," I demanded into the dark abyss in front of me. I felt like I was standing on a small cliff with a drop-off in front of me, but I wasn't sure. "Do it for me," she said. "You can't get me. They'll kill you." As these screams came closer and the footsteps closed in, I knew I had only one chance. Since I had not moved, I could only try stepping back in the direction I had came, which was 1 foot behind me. "I'm coming back for you," I yelled angrily, "and next time I'm taking you with me." I didn't give her a chance to answer. I stepped backwards, and the next thing I know, I landed on my back. The wind was knocked out of me. I sat up and coughed. I was back in the forest and directly on top of my backpack. As I stood, the portal in which I had just been shot out of opened again, illuminating a vivid array of lights. Only now I could hear those god-awful screams. I was scared, mad, and excited all at once, but mostly scared. I had no choice but to run. With tears running down my face, I screamed with defiance into the light, "I'm coming back, and when I do, I'm taking my sister home." As I got back to the path, I looked back, out of breath, gasping for air. I saw a tall humanoid shape appear from that window of light. It too was lit up. A scream came again, and I ran as far as I could before stopping and nearly vomiting from overdoing it. I felt like I had just run a mile in 6 minutes. If that thing was going to catch me, it would be able to do it right now because I could not move an inch. But it didn't. The thing never came for me. I made it home that night, but somehow I had lost 3 hours. When I got home, it was nearly 5 a.m., and I had not been gone that long. I was way out of my league on this, but I decided to keep it all to myself because I was going back, and this time I was willing to risk my life to bring my sister home. It was going to be do or die. Stay tuned for the path to the other side.